5 or 6 people watching live, that's fine. I would probably be watching this later also, or if I was in your position, just to be able to pause it. But there's a lot of stuff that you could miss by, you know, flying through and scrubbing through the videos, so it is to your benefit to be here. Thought I turned the music down. Let's go like that. Okay. And that should work. Okay. So, is it still not working? There we go. All right. So let us. Give me a second. Let's edit this. And nope. Let's edit this. Yeah. All right. I think that should work. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Pick up where we left off on the golf club helper, golf club selector, and just a quick catch up on general things. You should already be done since we've locked it off. The lesson 15, 16, 17 from Unit 5, and you should be working on both of your create tasks. A huge tip is that you should be working on your explore task. Just go to up here at create. You can either go to AppLab to start a new one, or just go to view all projects if you don't have any yet. And what that will do is, and I'm sure many of you have seen me do it before, it will go to just a blank AppLab canvas, but interface project, and it will be automatically saved to your view all projects. And that's the one I just made. And as opposed to the other option that would make things worse, is to go to the unit for create task and use this bubble. This is where code suggests you do your project, and you can do your project here. It will save the way that any other project will save. But if we will at some point need to open up the explore task unit, and when we do that, you will likely not be able to get to that bubble. So, I'm thinking about just locking it off. Mr. DeRusi, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I don't have any thoughts. I rarely have thoughts.
Yeah, it's dangerous. All right, so let's just pick up with the app that we're starting with. So far, all we have is a input screen and an output screen. Since then, I've just picked out some green colors. It seems pretty obvious that we should have a green theme just for, oh, that's gross, just for the fact that this is a golf um, based project. And if you're trying to get the exact same color from one screen to another, you can just copy the hexadecimal thing, hexadecimal code, and put it in there like that instead of searching for the exact color. Right now we only have two buttons, and all they do is switch back and forth between the screens, and I use duplicate to have them show up in the same place. And so now we have to work on some of the the meat of the actual coding. Let me see if I can find golf club app. Is this the thing? Okay. So we'll save that for later, and we'll save this for later. All right, so we're just starting out. We can already see some changes later on, but we're just starting out with a list of distances, just generic even distances that you would be from the hole, and the corresponding club that they go to. And our input, our user input, is going to be a drop-down menu from the input distance screen. And when they hit it, or when they choose one and hit club selection, it's going to put out the correct club to use. So let's just go with that. Our activate button, the button that's going to do stuff, is this output screen button. Right now, all it does is changes the screen to the output screen, which is the point, but we also need it to figure out what the user inputted and figure out where it is in our list of distances, and whatever spot the one that they chose is. So this is the fourth index. If they chose 135, it's the fourth item in this list. We want to return the fourth item in this list. So all of it's going to happen in this part right here. Let's go do some commenting. Compare user input. Let's get rid of that caps locks. Compare user input. What is going on with my stupid computer? Compare user input to list of output options. Okay, so how are we going to do this? Well, we need to check over each one of the distances that they could put in, and anytime you are checking through a bunch of things, we're going to need a loop. In this case, we're going to use a for loop, and we're going to start with 0, while variable I, or just a generic variable, is going to be our index, and we're going to do this until however many items are on the list, which is dists.length. And just to double check, let's do a console log of what would come out, dists index I. So this should print out this entire list. On the output screen. Yeah, so it printed out our entire list down here. That's what we wanted. That was just a check, and that's sort of the point of, that's the most common use for console.log, is just to use the debug console. All right, so we're going to go through each one, and let's create a new variable just so we don't have to get text a bunch of times. Let's make a new variable, because we need this every time. It's going to be a local variable. Variable user dist gets, and we're going to get text from what they get. It has to be here. Get number, set text, get text. And we're going to get text from that's weird. This is called distance input. Distance input dropdown. Okay, and I don't know why it jumped around like this, but it should be like that, and we need a semicolon. Okay, so this variable, this local variable, that's going to get reset each time. We should put this outside of the loop because I think that's better. Okay, so user dists is going to be whatever this is. Now we can compare every item in the list called dists to this user dist. So we need an if statement. So if user dists double equals the current item that we're checking, which the current item we're checking is dists index I, because every time we go through, I is going to go up. So the first time it goes through, I is 0. It's going to check the first item in the list called dist, and we want to check if it's the same as what they put in. And let's go like this, and we can user input from drop down, and so then we have our this. If that equals that, what do we want to do? Well, we want to set the text of this. This is called club output something. This is called club output text area. We want to set the text of club output text area to, well, we don't want to set it to text. And hold on, for text area to text. Shouldn't say output. Set text of, well, let's just try it the way it's supposed to. Okay, so if dists I is what they put in, then we want to set the text to clubs I, clubs index I. And I think that should work. Let's go ahead and run. Let's choose the second one. And club selection. Okay, why is this not working? Is this a text input? This is called club output text area. Let's leave it that blank. Set club output text area. This is output screen buttons click. Set screen to you know what? I think it should be get number. Get number of user input dist input dropdown. Let's try that. There we go. All right, because this is a list, it's considered a list of numbers. It is it because user test should be, I'm not positive why, but get number seems to work there. So right now we have a down and dirty put in the distance, and let's see if it works for the last one. This should be 3 iron. Bingo. Okay, that's super basic. I don't think that it should it would count for all the requirements for the create task as far as algorithms and abstractions. So we obviously need some more things. Okay, so how about let's make sure that, so if we go run and choose this and hit club selection, it'll give this. If we go back to the front, or back to the first one, it will still be on that. So let's add a first one, another first one, and it doesn't matter that this is text because we're comparing. It won't matter. It will never line up. So select distance to the hole. Is that enough space? Let's say to the pin. Okay, and we haven't really changed anything. So we go here, we set it to 135, club selection. When we go back, it should set this. How do you reset this? Because this is not an item. Let's set element. Maybe it set element, set property. What does set property do? Set property of this. What properties do we have to work for? A lot of it. Hidden border, text, index, 0. Let's see if that works. We want it to, when we go back, it should go back to select distance. Hey, it worked. That's fantastic. Okay, so it does actually count this drop down as an index. So the way we can prove that is if we set it to, we want the index to go to index 1. That means if we run it, when we go to the output and back to the input, it should switch it to 100 yards. Yeah, okay, so we figured that out. That's good. Okay, so just having a clear and reset things is always a good idea. And so let's add some more things. Okay, so right now we just have distance. Let's, a distance with a drop down. We can, let's, because I don't want to break this, we'll be able to come back to this. Let's call this drop down in input, and I want to make a new one, and we'll call this one, try to figure out a way to have the user be able to, instead of use a drop down, actually type in a number, but then we still need to compare and figure out which one it's closer to. So this is going to take some algorithming, and let's call this, can you guys even see the top of my screen? Yeah. Number input. Why we no type. Number input. Oh, well, I guess it would be called just text input. All right, honestly, I'm not entirely sure how we're going to do this, but we know we can get rid of this, and let's put in a text input here, and we'll call this, let's call this distance input, or distance text input, because it is a text input. And let's put a placeholder text of input distance to the pin. And let's how about let's put a label. Let's copy this, cut this. Let's put a label, just doing a little bit of design here, so that it makes a little more sense. We don't really need to worry about the names of our labels because they're not going to be any sort of interface or any sort of action. But I want it to be clear that we want yards. Everything's going to be in yards. And all right, so let's go to the code. When we click on output screen, we want to get the number of this. So this is, we're still moving on, and we don't need this. Let's, just to double check, let's console log if we're getting the correct thing, which would be user dist. And so let's run, let's say we're 113 yards away, club selection, and it printed 113. Okay, so we know this part actually works, and when we go back, let's see here, let's run, so 144, club selection. When we go back, we want it to be cleared out, so we want to set, we can probably just use set text here. And so we're going to switch the screen, set text of, it's called dist text input, dist, is it right there? Dist text input to an empty string to clear it out. And again, I'm just stalling because I'm not sure what we're going to do here. Okay, good. All right, so now what we need to do is get the distance from each option and figure out which option it's closest to. So we're going to need a couple of variables. We are going to need best club, and we're going to call that best club the first one, dist index 0. And we also need a variable closest diff. Okay, so we need to, for any number they put in, we're going to figure out how far away it is from this first one, and that's going to be the number that we compared against the existing best. So it's always going to be like, is the difference between whichever club higher or lower, and you take the distance that's closer. So closest diff, and we also need a closest diff is, that needs to be a value. Let's just start with 0. And how about a new variable, this is getting out of control, called new diff, and I'll set that to 0 just to start. Okay, so let's see here. We are going to get a new number, and we need to take, we're going to go through each one, and let's say new diff, the new difference, whenever we run this loop, we're going to take the new difference from whatever the next club we're checking. So new difference is, well, we need an we're going to do absolute value because it could be positive or negative.
I'm just asking a quick question here. Could it be, I know it's probably going to be more work intensive. Could you just do like if statements? So like get text and then like compare if between, if greater than 130 but less than 135 or whatever, select that. Could you do something like, I'm just kind of asking. It probably would end up being a huge if statement, through the loop, but I'm just not sure if that would be
Yeah.
Because whenever you want to think anytime that you have like a long kind of thing, there's probably an easier way to do it, but that could be a good starting point. I don't know. I don't know where you were
Let's
thinking of going.
yeah, that is definitely an easier way to do it for our current setup. And so let's do it that way to begin with. Um, Good call, Mr. DeRusi.
I just like to keep it simple to start,
Yeah,
and then
yeah. Okay, so we'll save that for now. Let's say so we need to um, we can still
it would be
if
like a
text.
super if else.
Yeah. And yeah, so it's going to be a crazy if else for like 100 of them. So if user distance, and we're gonna user distance is less than or equal to, and we want this to, we're going to go through just for our own uh, method, and we want it to choose 100 if it's 104 or less. So if user distance is less than or equal to 104, then we will let's create a new variable, just call it output, or output club equals um, distance index 0. I don't know if that even matters because we're going to change it here in a second. Um, let's just make it, just declare it so that we can mess with it later. And so if user distance, we're going to set output club to the first item in the list, which is clubs index 0. Okay, so that's the first condition. Then, and we don't have to do like the next one would be between 105 and 115. Are we counting down? So 105 or between 105 and 115, we don't need an and statement because if it's less than 105, it's already been taken out. So we just are doing this in order, and this was definitely one that we did in the lesson for if statements, where it was like if grades are this or that, but and how we can just do less than 115, and we'll copy this, and this is going to get the second item in the list, or clubs index 1, and we're just going to test this as we go. Whenever we're done, we're going to set the text of dist text, no wait, club output text area. We're going to set the text of club output text area to output club. Not put club, output club. So this would only work for the first, or let's try here. Let's try 99 yards. 9 iron. Oh, this is actually working. Let's go back here. Oh, and it cleared out. Let's try 114. This should give us an 8 iron. Good. And if we do 115, it should break it. Yep, nothing, it didn't work. Undefined, good. Because we don't have anything, any condition for 105. So let's go through and just do a bunch of these. Let's do, we probably get to text better. And 115. And what's the next one? 125. And the next one would be, what's halfway here? 133. And it's easier just to go to here and add a few more of these. I think that might be enough. And so we're at 133. We need 157. I think I went up a half before and down a half there, but that's fine. And the next one is going to be 172. 170. Let's go 173. These should all round up because the halfway in between. So this was 158, 133. I think that's right. And we'll go back here, and we're already at the end. So everything else means that it would get the last one. So this last one just needs to be an else statement. But if you add and remove, the last one is no longer an else statement. We could put in if user distance is greater than or equal to 173, but we have the option of just making it. Oh, it did make an else there. Okay, so now we can just go through and set these to every index. So this is 1. We need 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think that's the last one. We have 7 options, so let's try here. 142. I guess that's right. 5 iron. And let's try 179. 3 iron. Let's try 2,000. 20,000. Should give us a 3 iron. Okay. So this works. That was a good tip, Mr. DeRusi. So that is a real basic way. Again, I'm not sure if this would, as it is, count as a. I mean, I suppose this would be an algorithm. We don't really have an abstraction yet. So let's call this text input if else. Save it, and let's remix it, and let's do this. Let's call this one not text input if else, text input loop differences, loop diffs. And so this is going to be much more complicated, but it will leave us some options. One thing that I'm thinking about, and Mr. Drucy and I thought about this before, was having some sort of slider where the slider could be a lot of things, like how high the grass is, which would affect your club choice, and it could be something like the user might think that it makes a difference where it is over here, but you could set it to if it's anything above middle, you add a club, and if it's anything below the middle, you subtract a club. These are all possibilities. You could have it be what was the other thing we were talking about, Mr. Drucy, about what we could use a slider for?
I think it was possibility of just using the slider for yardage as well, but I like the idea of having like grass length with the slider. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
So
Be
like
cool
if it's like tall, you go to like you could add little pictures on the bottom and be like grass length, maybe like a little graphic underneath it.
that changes as you move it.
No, maybe just have like normal grass length in the middle, and then like when I guess you could.
Well, you could have little
That'd be
pictures
really
of like
difficult.
you could have a picture of like sand, um, uh,
Like a terrain
fairway.
slider, and then like rough.
Yeah, it'd be like all the options of terrains, and then you would use that value to calculate.
If you want to get
But
even more complicated, you could do like lie above or below your feet, like if you're on a hill and whatnot. That would be.
I
And
mean,
then
these
like,
are all
okay, you
things.
need to aim right or aim left.
That's true. That would be good. Um, all these, any of these things, we're just having the option of sliding, of changing, taking what we have right now. What we have right now is um, choosing a club and then um, either going, and in fact, let's, this is not going to be loop. I want to work with this slider first. Text input um, with slider. What do we call this? Terrain slider? Or the lie, how the ball lies. And I'm going to keep this loop right here. Um,
There is a question asking if the if statement or the if else else if statement is an algorithm that includes at least two or more algorithms.
I do think it kind of is, but
I
I'm going to
mean,
keep adding features and see if we come up with something that's super cool. But what we have right now is um, what we have right now is a. In fact, I want to create the one for the loop and then go back just because I don't want to lose the loop stuff, but I want to get rid of it in this with looping. Um, Actually, we don't need to do, oh, whatever. With looping, save, and we're going to go back to all of our projects, and I want to go to the one called Lie Slider. And yeah. Okay, so this is a good setup so far. Let's get rid of this um, loop situation. And
and just real quick, I think this does technically work as an algorithm. It's like a step-by-step process, and it solves a problem and it gives a correct answer. So I think it meets the requirements. So I would say yes, it does, but also there's no harm in making it better.
yeah, I do think so also. But we definitely need some abstraction. And I think what we can do is create a function that gathers the value of the slider and adjusts this output. So our main event handler is when they click on this button, it checks which club is best based on the distance. But before we set the text, we want to check the location of the slider, and the way we're going to do that is with a function. And I still think it's kind of a baller move to call a function that doesn't exist yet, but let's call a function. By call, I mean like invoke a function called check slider. Okay, so we're calling a function called check slider. Now let's define a function called check slider. So what are we going to do? We need, um, well, first let's see what the slider. Um, let's call this the lie slider, as the ball lies, and let's go from what is value? Oh, the starting location. Um, let's do it. Well, how many options? Let's say we want 5 options, and we want the starting value to be 3, and the minimum value to be 1. Okay, so um, that I'm thinking just 5 options of um, sand, fairway, rough. Can you think of another, maybe just three options? Three options, minimum value 1, starting 2. Okay, and we can get more into the weeds, so to speak, with like images that change. I think that'd be nice if, as the user on this screen, changed um, the value of the slider, they um, saw a different picture here before they hit club selection. I think that could be fun. But let's call this um, rough. I know that's not how it's spelled. Rough label, RUF, and let's call this one fairway. And we'll space these out in a second. Sand label, and we'll have the text say sand. And let's space these out a little better. Let's go, that's not what I want. Okay, and so we have sand label, fairway label, rough label. Let's do some unnecessary stuff like on event slider. What do we call it? Lie slider. Lie slider is moved. Is moved an option? Change. Let's also, I want this to be, let's make it bigger. Like, is that, maybe you guys can see where I'm headed with this, where it will change the size of the text as we slide back and forth. And I know this isn't like coding per se, but it is something you can think about. So text size 13, this is 17. So let's go back to the code. If the slider moves, changes, what does a slider's event handler look like? On event slider input, oh, it's input. On event slider input, input, once there's an input, set, we're going to set property. Input equals 3. Let's do if input, hold on, what would we call, first of all, let's just see what the documentation says, or what will come out if we just put input. Input hasn't assigned. I don't want to create all these variables, but let's see here. We'll create a variable called lie text equals oh no, we already have get number. Excuse me. So we can just start with our if statement. If get number, let's just drag out a math one for now. If get number of lie slider equals 3, then we want to set some properties. Set property of, what are these things called? Rough label. Rough label to rough label font size, and our big number was 17, and I'm not sure. Rough label, I should just do this a second. What was the next one? Fair label and sand label, font size. So on 3, which is this end, we want rough label to be big and these two to be small. And then we can do this again.
You might want to just test this one out to make sure it works before going through all the other copy paste this.
Well, it's not that. Let's just go like this. And can I copy this? I'm just gonna pretty confident that yeah, you're probably right. Okay, so let's run and sweet. Okay, so well, we don't have it yet, but it works in general. Let's do a couple of these because I don't know how to do that. I guess we can leave the last one as else. Let's get number of lie slider of 2. If it's 2, we want fairway label to be the large one, and the only other option is lie slider is 1, so we don't even need an if, it's just else, and then we will make the sand label 17 point font. So let's see how that works. So we go like this. One of the parameters is empty. Line 6, 9. Oh, womp womp. Run. Okay, I'm pretty pleased with that. That's fun.
Yo, is it just me or is fairway not centered? I don't know why. It didn't look centered to me. It's bugging me out, man.
Yeah, I believe you. I can't make this any bigger from where I can see. All right, so let's make these 3 things the same. So if we go from 0, how big do we want? What is 320 divided by 3? Can we get that? It doesn't go by 3. 107, but that gets us to 21. So let's just see what happens if we start it at, with a width of 107, and this one should start at 107 and be a width of 107, and this one should start at 214. Let's go 214 and have a width of 107. And
is the slider centered in the page too?
I do not believe so. And we'll center everything in its text box. And well, that's not good. I don't like that. Why is this one so off? Width 300. Let's try. Is it that far off? Why does this look so much farther away than that? Height 25, height 25, and height 25, and width y 335, 335, 335, exposition 214. It definitely needs to be less. What if we just did try this. Let's go.
I think the word length makes a difference too, and it's and where it's going to end up.
Oh, because I didn't have it centered. I didn't. Accidentally hit.
Or the simpler solution.
Yeah. Okay. So let's run this. And let's see here. Run. Okay, it still works. Well, personally, I think that's pretty darn cool. But let's center that slider. So the X position is the left side. So let's call it, what is half of 107? 53. I mean, that's pretty good. And then we need 2 length, which is 214. Let's just put it on the center. And height shouldn't really matter. Let's see what that looks like. I don't know about you guys, but I am impressed with myself.
That looks very nice. Maybe you could highlight the background of it too. Oh, wait. Just make it more complicated.
Yeah, you absolutely could. It's this set property thing. You can set any property of any user interface element like that. So that's just one thing. Okay, so let us, wish there was like a center on screen situation. I do not think that there is. Okay, so let's actually apply this. We are going to
I did have a question for you, Mr. Hull. How late were we planning on going on this today? I think we've been going for about an hour at this point. So
have we
I
really?
didn't know.
Wow. How are you? Can you go another like 15 or like till 1:30?
Let me just double check something. I have a Zoom meeting later, but yeah, I can do that.
Okay. Well, we'll do another like 15 or 20 and then call it from there. All right. So we need to on event lie slider moves. We have this, and let's get another variable. Set variable. Oh, you know what? We can have this be go from -1 to +1 if our goal is to have, if the user chooses sand, it's going to be 1 club less or
And then
more
-1 from the
lofty.
index.
Yep, exactly. And rough, you need 1 more club, even though that might not be the best strategy. We can just set this, instead of being from 1 to 3, we can have it go from -1. Can it not do negative? Oh yeah, -1 to +1, and our starting value is going to be 0. And so we have, what did I just do? Did I ruin it? No, I don't think I did. So if lie slider is 1, that's the bigger one. If lie slider is 0, that's the middle one, and otherwise it needs to be the left one. And so let's double check it still works. Good. And we're going to use this slider to set a new variable. Let's call this, let's make it a global variable because a couple places may end up needing it. Let's call it lie. Did I already use lie difference? Lie slider value. We're going to set it to 0 because that's our starting position. And so if we slide it to 1, that means we're going to change that value of lie slider val.
Could you set the variable to just get the lie slider info, like get number?
Yes, you could.
I don't know if that would
Where would you put that
mess it.
in? So would that be in the, um, let's put this here because we're going to run check slider of here. It doesn't need to be in here. We only need to check its value as it pertains to the actual club use. That we only need that when we switch to club selection, which is the this is where we can do get value or get number of lie slider and lie slider, get value of lie slider, and just to double check, this is always a good idea. Let's console log lie slider val, the variable. So let's run it. Hit here. We should console log 1. Good. And go back. And if we go here, should it be -1? Beautiful. Okay, so we want run check slider with output club. We could turn this into a parameter, but it would work better with the looping situation, because then we can pass through which index it is. Yeah, I'm going to save this one for looping. And in fact, let's go ahead and call it there, because that'll be a good place to a good event to try and solve how to loop through each, do a for loop that goes through each item and compares instead of just using greater than or less than. Oh shoot. We could just do it right now. And I mean, we could use it the way it is, but either way, we're going to do it tomorrow. And so, are there any outstanding, fantastic questions?
There are no questions in the chat. I think we should maybe comment out at the top with our plan for tomorrow, so we know where to pick up tomorrow. Just throw like a this is what we're gonna do comment. I tend to forget.
Yeah. So let's actually let's remix this one. We'll call it remix mimix. Rename. I keep forgetting to get rid of remix. Golf club helper. This one is golf club text input, text, slider, and loop. And let's go to all of our projects and figure out which one is which. This is the one that was going to be, this one is nothing. Let's delete that. And this one is, let's open this and rename it to Golf Club Helper, text, and lie slider. And save. And let's go to projects. So we have drop down input, if else, text, lie slider, and this one, and this is the one we're going to work on for tomorrow. And let's add a comment at the very top. Change if else to for loop, and input or use slider value. Use slider value possibly as return function. Value with parameters possibly as return function. Okay, so that's what we're going to call it for today. We'll change this into a for loop, and then use this check slider as a return function. All right, well then we'll see you guys tomorrow, and have a good one.